All right. Hello, and welcome to the School Fiscal Services Division webinar for the new Principal Apportionment Data Collection web application. This presentation is provided for staff at the county offices of education who will be involved in setting up their county users for reporting data in the new application for the current fiscal year 2021-22. We'll provide the following topics in this webinar. We'll talk briefly about the overview and the anticipated schedule for the rollout of the web application, covering the time period between now and January 2022. We'll talk about tax reporting and county auditor assignments right away because their data are due far in advance of the average daily attendance and other first principal apportionment period data. And for that reason, setting up the county auditor users is our first priority. We'll then talk about options for user assignments for districts, charter schools, and SELPAs. And we'll discuss the process of the assignment of the PADC administrators for these entities and the process of data certifications because those decisions go hand in hand. All right. First of all, I want to talk about some of the resources that we have available on the CDU website. As we already mentioned, this webinar will be recorded and posted on the CDU website, and everything related to this new application lives on the Principal Apportionment Data Collection webpage. And the webpage is located on the address that's shown on the slide. It is the same page that we use for the PADC desktop software. So that page now has the new PADC web application as well as the desktop software resources, because the desktop software still applies to data reporting for fiscal years prior to 2021-22. On the web page itself, we have the link to the new PADC web application, like I mentioned. And we are planning future training sessions or YouTube tutorials focused on specific features of the new application. The web application is not collecting any new data, so we're not planning to focus our outreach on data being collected. Instead, we are probably going to focus on the new interface and some of the changes in the formatting, because some of the data entry screens will look different and function differently, and we want to make sure we focus on that. There's also a user manual for the PADC web application. The initial version 1.00 that we posted focuses on the web application overview and talks about the user assignments. The user manual version 2.00 will be released shortly on around October 1st. It will cover data entry, validation, certification, and provide reporting instructions for tax data reporting. Now on to a brief overview and background for our data collection system. So the principal apportionment is a series of apportionment calculations that adjust the flow of state funds throughout the fiscal year as updated data becomes available, which we collect through this system we call Principal Apportionment Data Collection. The programs that are funded based on the data include local control funding formula, which is the main source of general purpose funding for districts, charters, and county offices of education. Special education, AB 602 funding also uses the data that we collect, and there are a few other programs as well. For example, there's the new ongoing expanded learning opportunities program that's going to use ADA that we collect through the Principal Apportionment Data Collection. We collect data 3 times per fiscal year, and corrections are submitted in subsequent fiscal years. PADC collects average daily attendance, which we refer to as ADA, local revenue data, which we commonly refer to as taxes. There's some special education specific data collections and a few other data pieces. In the past, we have used what we call PADC desktop software, which is a software product that is year specific and it's downloaded by each particular user on their desktop. And that desktop software technology-wise is giving us a lot of trouble and is not sustainable. And that is the main reason we are moving forward with transitioning to a web application. So that desktop software has built-in certification hierarchy, but the files are shared between users by emails, and then they are uploaded to School Fiscal Services Division via the electronic file transfer system. When we switch to data collection in the new web application, we're going to have the same data approval hierarchy as the desktop software. We will employ built-in entity relationships and route data for approvals electronically, and then fully certified files will be marked as ready to transfer to CDE, all done automatically. I would like to now share our anticipated schedule. So the web application replaces the desktop software for 2021-22 fiscal year, and that means that all of the data must be collected in the new application. So obviously the timing of this change is not ideal. The local educational agencies and CDE are having to deal with a multitude of issues related to the pandemic and the fallout. So we already postponed the application release 1 or 2 years, but we were left with very little choice for this fiscal year due to our technology constraints. And we do hope that by working closely with the county offices, we can make this transition happen this year and collect the data that we need to fund everyone. And we'll continue to work on the application enhancements in future years and release additional features, hopefully, with future releases of this application. So now specifically to the schedule, on September 1st, our division began assigning COE administrators, which are essentially like super users in the web application. As of yesterday, we have assigned administrators for 50 of our 58 counties, and the response from the COEs following our instructions have been very prompt, and we're very appreciative of that. On about October 1st, we want to make sure that we have county auditors assigned because they can begin reporting taxes once we open the data collection screens for them. November 15th is the statutory deadline for reporting property tax information. And again, in order to ensure that we meet this deadline, we want to make sure that we have provided access to those that are going to be reporting taxes. Once tax reporting is addressed, the months of October and November can be used to set up users for school districts, charter schools, and SELPAs with the goal of assigning everyone by December 1st. Every county will be on a slightly different schedule. So there's nothing preventing a county from starting this assignment process now. However, we want to emphasize the importance of getting the tax data collection arranged as a priority before everyone proceeds to assigning other users. And of course, the bulk of the 2021-22 first principal apportionment period reporting is due on January 18th, 2022. This will include ADA, charter school physical location, transfer of funds options, and infant funding. Now, in addition to the deadlines we just went over, there will be prior year reporting completed in this quote unquote old way through the PADC desktop software. So that includes data for fiscal year 2020-21. The due dates vary. Please monitor our website for those due dates. But in general, what we're talking about is 2020-21 annual data and prior year corrections for 2020-21 and prior fiscal years. So we'll operate this way for a few years until the prior year correction cycle is fully completed for fiscal year 2020-21. And we ask that you please ensure that the staff responsible for and familiar with the PADC desktop software are aware of this ongoing need. So please do not start removing those desktop software copies from your computers. All right, and now we'll move on to this next section of our presentation, which in which we will discuss the process for county auditor assignments and some changes to the taxes reporting. So we have reached out to the California State Association of State Auditors and hope that those auditors that are subscribed to their association's email notifications received our information. Some counties have already initiated the contacts to the county auditors, which is great. The COEs are able to proceed with assigning other users, as I mentioned, but please make sure that this county auditor assignments are taken care of first. Local revenue is what we use kind of as a collective term for what was just taxes in the past, because we now have the taxes data entry screen and the fairly new Excess Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, Excess ERAF, data entry screen. So local revenue group will also include special education tax allocation and miscellaneous funds, but those screens are not part of the data set due on November 15th, so we're not covering them in this presentation. To access the screen, a user would not navigate to data entry and then pick local revenue. Remember this grouping of screens used to be called county auditor in our desktop software. So this screenshot is from the web application, shows the two screens as they will appear for Kings County, for example. Now, data entry can be done by either the county auditor or the COE. Both of these user groups have access to the screens. In the same fashion as the desktop software, the certification includes two sign-offs, one for the county auditor and the other one for the COE. Now, the county auditor assignment is going to include several steps. So this information would apply to counties in which the county auditor reports data in the PADC. So first of all, the county auditor would open an account in the Centralized Authentication System that we refer to as CAS. They should select the COE as the association type. Then the county auditor would need to complete this form that we provided for this purpose. It's called PADC Web Application Access Request County Auditor Admin Assignment, and that's available on the PADC page. The auditor would then submit this application to the COE administrator of the county. So our challenge here would be to let the county auditor know who at the COE is the COE administrator so that their document doesn't get lost. We expect that some COEs may reach out to their county auditors directly. If any county auditor is having trouble, they've been provided with our information. Hopefully they will contact us, and we can also provide the county auditor the name and contact information for the COE administrator of the county. And as a final step, the COE will assign the county auditor access to the PADC web application. This should trigger an automated confirmation message to the county auditor so they know that they have been assigned. Now, the data reporting by the county auditor will also follow some steps. First of all, the county auditor may assign additional users. For example, a data entry user who could help with keying data. Once the data are keyed in, either the data entry user or the administrator user will run validation checks. So validation is just a new term that we use to refer to the check save function in the PADC desktop software. The county auditor administrator will certify the data. The system should send an email to the COE administrator once the county auditor certifies so that the COE administrator can certify. And if data revisions are needed, the COE administrator must remove certification. That would unlock the screen and the county auditor could make changes if those are needed. Now, As another option, there is, and some counties have done so in the past and want to continue doing this in the web application, is there is an option of tax data reporting directly by the COE. And so both taxes and excess ERF can be completed this way. Some options there: the user assigned to the COE user group may access taxes and excess ERF, but keep in mind that they can access any other data entry screen in the county. And this one user will certify data as both the county auditor and the COE. If the COE wants to grant access to one of its staff to just taxes and excess ERF screens, the COE can assign one of its staff as a county auditor in the PADC. This person would certify as county auditor, and the CO administrator would certify as the COE. Now, when users open the taxes screen in the PADC application, they will notice some changes in the format. This is a sample of just the top portion of this data entry screen. There is only one data entry tab, and it has preloaded records for school districts and COE. In the past, the user would select the district or county receiving taxes by clicking Add New in the desktop software. In this version, those lines that identify the entity for which the taxes are reported for are grayed out. And that's because the records have been pre-populated based on the expected list of all districts and COEs for which taxes must be reported. We did have a challenge here with the ordering of these entities. They're mostly alphabetical now, but there are some specific rules for how we order things when it has to do with County Office of Education and cross-county reporting. And we have included that information in the user manual that will be released on around October 1st when the screen is available. Those instructions will also be available. There are a few other changes. So first, we, like I mentioned, we have only one tab with preloaded records. We have added functionality to report cross-county taxes. The data must be keyed into all the applicable fields. This system does not accommodate data import. So for larger counties with a lot of data, the county auditor or the COE completing the screen may want to assign one or more data entry users to assist with the keying. For this and the other screens in the web application, the user has to remember to save each record before proceeding to the next, otherwise the data will be lost. In the desktop software, each record had to be saved automatically, but there was a prompt for that. We added reminder text on the screen, but there will be no prompt upon moving to the new screen. So we want to make sure everybody remembers to save before they go to next or previous screen. We have added a summary tab, which is updated on save, and it totals all the data points once the user clicks save. Now, we are still developing a data export feature, which could be helpful here when there are large amounts of data. Realistically, we think it might be available in time for ADA reporting in December and not in October, but then the tax reporting could take advantage of that feature starting with the second principal apportionment period reporting. That's going to happen this coming spring. So that concludes the section of the presentation where we talked about taxes reporting and county auditor assignments. I would like now to talk about PADC user assignment options for all the other entities. And by those, we mean County Office of Education users, because there will be multiple, most likely, school districts, charter schools, and SELPAs. Now, these are the basic steps for new user access. They're the same as the ones we discussed for the county auditor. Each user must have an account in the centralized authentication system. For each user, the appropriate type of access must be determined. And once that's done, each user must request another PADC user to grant access. oversight entity would set up the initial administrators for school districts, for example, then the administrator would set up the remaining users. Now let's talk briefly about this CAS system that we have. So we already mentioned that existing CAS usernames can be used. But if someone is in the CAS system and they had a job change, we want to make sure that you verify that your CAS account is associated with your new LEA and that your email address in CAS is current, because that is what our system will use for notification. The CAS details that we will use in PADC in addition to email is everyone's username, first and last name, telephone number, and email. When you are creating CAS account, every user should save their security questions and answers in case they forget their password and need to reset it. Passwords are now valid for 240 days. This time frame has been extended from what it was earlier, which is great for our users, because they may only access the PADC just a few times a year. Keep in mind that other CDE reporting systems use CAS, but there's no separate division that handles the issues. So if a user has any issues with CAS and need the account help, we ask that you contact PADC if you need the CAS user account to access the PADC. And so we have a new dedicated email box that we monitor, and that is provided for you on the screen, which is padc@cde.ca.gov. All right. Now, once the CAS user account is set up, some decisions have to be made of what role this new user play in the system. So we have this flow chart that's also available in the user guide about user assignment decisions. We'll cover these items in more detail in the following slide. And obviously, the way that each county and each LEA will go about these decisions may be very different. We are hopeful that the system allows sufficient flexibility so that the majority of the users can make it work for their specific circumstances. So we'll first talk about user roles. This is a new feature in the PADC web application. The desktop software had only one level of access. The administrator is the only one required, is the only required role because it is the only one that can certify data, and certification is needed in order to submit data to SFSD. Now there's also a manager role, and that user can handle user assignments and monitor records completion to ping the COE administrator that, or any administrator, that those are ready for certification. A data entry role can be used for someone to key data and run validation checks and make sure the data are all good and ready for certification before the administrator accesses the data. And lastly, we have a view-only role that we set up, thinking that maybe it could be used for auditors conducting annual audit or any other internal or external folks that need to view data that was reported by the LEA for reference. Now, this table lists the user groups available to the County Office of Education to assign. It also shows what type of data is available to each user group. In general, these user groups function in the same manner as the PADC desktop software, in which the county office, you see on the top line there, has access to all the data in the county, which will include COEs, school districts, SELPAs, charter schools, and local revenue data collection. The rest of the groups have limited access. It's limited just to their entity and perhaps a few other entities under their oversight. There are some limitations to the current structure of the user groups. First of all, each CAS user account may be associated with one role and one user group per county. And for that reason, assignments should be made at the highest level of access required. LEA should be mindful of creating access that is too limiting or too broad. And if one person requires 2 different roles in the county, the person must log on with 2 different CAS user accounts. There's no limit to how many CAS user accounts each person can have. Now, we have some known issues. In the past, in the desktop software, we had a function where a school district user group can access SELPA data. Right now in the PADC application, that is not available. So the solution to that is for the same person to have 2 CAS user accounts, one to be assigned to school district and SELPA. And to be as clear as possible, here's a little example. So we have Mr. Jack London as Jack London School District, which is the CAS username for his first account, and he's assigned by the COE as the school district administrator. And then Jack London sets up a second CAS username, Jack London SELPA, and is also assigned by the COE as the SELPA administrator. So this would help Jack if his school district is the SELPA administrative unit and needs to report infant data, for example. Now, to put these user groups in context, please look at this slide, which shows a screenshot from the PADC desktop software and shows the user groups that were employed in the desktop software. Those were county office, county auditor, school district, charter school, and SELPA. So very similar to what we have in the new application. Now, the things that we have modified are as follows. So the charter schools under the oversight of the State Board of Education, they have separate access. They're no longer available for the COE because the COE does not enter data or certify data. If the COE wants to just view the data for one of those charter schools, the Charter Schools Division in CDE can provide them view-only access, and we can facilitate that process for you. All other charter schools are separated now into 2 groups, and they're done so by the oversight entity to facilitate the user assignments and certification process. So we'll talk about those in more detail in the next slides. And as I mentioned earlier, school districts currently do not have access to SELPAs with their school district logon, but they can be assigned separately by the COE if needed. So this new group that we have called Charter School COE Oversight includes the following schools. So we have our schools that were COE approved after a school district denied pursuant to Education Code Section 47605. This group also includes county program charters pursuant to Section 47605.5. This group also includes county-wide charters authorized pursuant to Ed Code 47605.6. And there's this new group that is a charter school approved by the State Board of Education with the COE designated by the SBE as the chartering authority. This is a new feature that was implemented by Assembly Bills 1505 and 1507 recently. Now, each record for charter schools in this group must be certified by the charter school and the COE. And this is what brings all of these different types of charter schools into one user group. Now we'll talk about the second group of charters, which is charter school district oversight. So this group includes charter schools for which a particular district has approved the charter petition or has been designated by the SBE as the chartering authority pursuant to the new rules adopted by Assembly Bills 1505 and 1507. So for this current fiscal year, we do not have any of such schools in the state. So for these types of schools, each data record must be certified by the charter school, school district, and the COE in the same fashion as the data that is collected through the old desktop software. And now some specifics about SELPA users. So we really only have a couple of data entry screens for SELPA. We have infant funding, which is reported by the COEs and school districts that are SELPA administrative units. And then we have extraordinary cost pool data that we collect on a couple of different data entry screens. And what happens there is typically the SELPA members report that data. And the SELPA entities have a couple of choices here to make. First, if the SELPA wishes to certify ECP data, it may assign the LEA, who's a SELPA member, a data entry role so that they can key in cost information for each of their students. And then the SELPA AU can log in as an administrator and certify that data. If the SELPA wants to completely delegate the ECP reporting and certification to the SELPA member, it may assign that LEA a SELPA administrator role and allow the LEA to certify as the SELPA. And this will become more important later on in the year when ECP is collected, which isn't really a year from now because it's an annual data entry screen with its own deadline, I believe. Lastly, I want to cover the LEA assignments, which is the last user assignment decision that has to be made. So a user may be assigned to one or more LEAs within the county. This feature isn't really necessary in most of the traditional setups, but it could be useful in a case where there's a charter management organization and they have responsibility for reporting data for more than one charter school in the county. Then the assigning entity can literally just pick the charter schools from the list and assign more than one to a single user. The users assigned to an LEA may access data entry screens for that LEA and any LEAs under its jurisdiction, including charter schools. For example, a user assigned as a school district admin will have admin permissions for school district data, such as attendance school district, and all the charter schools under district oversight, for example, attendance charter school. Now, oh, here's an example. I was a little delayed. I apologize. So it is possible that an LEA may have some very specific needs when it comes to user assignments. So please feel free to email us at our address padc@cda.ca.gov, and we can help you come up with the type of assignment that could meet those needs if it doesn't look like at first glance our proposed user groups and roles meet your needs. So we are available to assist with some of these decisions as well. Now, there are a few more details about LEA assignments. LEA assignments are fiscal year specific. So this impacts all of these following categories: school district reorganizations, charter school closures, changes in oversight entities, and new charter schools. But please be prepared for it to take some time for us to update our system to the most changes. So to the most recent changes. So for example, if we were just notified of a new charter school, which first gets numbered, then assigned a CDS code, then it's added to our internal database, and only then we run a separate process that would enable that charter school to appear in the web application. So there is a little bit of process and time involved in that. For any fiscal year, our goal will always be to assign all entities, any new entities or changes by December 1st, which is typically on or around the time that we release the main data collection to all the users. Please note that if there is an LEA change, the prior data corrections must be reported and certified by the entities applicable to that fiscal year. This really won't become an issue for us until we go into fiscal year 22-23, when we'll start dealing with prior year corrections. And the nice thing about the web application is that continuing LEAs do not need to be reassigned each year. Now, there are obviously multiple combinations of user role, user group, and entity, but clearly the most far-reaching role among all possible ones is the one of the COE administrator, which we've previously referred to as super users. Now, COE administrators have the highest level of permissions, and they can do all of the following. They can assign any user in the county, but you don't have to. This function can be handled by a COE manager. The COE admin can enter, validate, and certify any data. This might come in handy when there are last-minute revisions and there's not time to reach other users to make the corrections. And the COE admin can enter, the COE admin is the only user that can remove certification. An exception to this is a case of a school district that can remove a charter school certification if the district hasn't yet certified. So the certification in PADC web application acts as a seal on the record. Once the record is sealed, it can't be altered. So the COE admin is the one to decide if revisions are needed and to remove the certification to enable those revisions. In addition, the COE administrator is going to be the primary contact for us for any questions and edits, but potentially that are needed, and to coordinate any revisions in their submittal. And given that the responsibilities are fairly significant, we set up the system to allow multiple COE administrators so they can split this workload by either subject area or LEA type or any other accommodation that the COE needs. In this last section, we want to discuss the user assignment decisions that have to take into account the data flow and certification hierarchy. So the user assignments will be made in the following sequence. The CDE, School Fiscal Services Division, assigns COE administrators. The COE administrator or manager assigns administrators for districts, COEs, charters, and SELPAs. And this particular slide focuses just on the COE role, so it doesn't show the step of the school districts assigning administrators for charter schools under their oversight. So we have set up this process in this particular manner to allow the COEs to make decisions on the assignment of PADC administrators, because those folks will ultimately certify data that will flow back to the COE. So our division, SFSD, also has a small number of staff with a type of a role that we created that would allow us to step in and make assignments on behalf of the COE in case the COE is not able to do so. So please email us and let us know if user assignments help is needed. Now, the flow of the data collected in the PADC remains the same, and you'll see that this chart is the exact opposite of the one on the previous slide. The flow of data collected in the Principal Apportionment Data Collection web application is the same as the desktop software. All entities certify and route data to the COE, which certifies and uploads the data to CDE. So the manual routing of data by email, for example, will now be automated. And we will use these user assignments with predetermined permissions to determine who and when can edit and certify data. Now, of course, the specifics of who's involved, how staff communicate across entities and share data currently differs for each county. And the certification decisions come into play because the desktop software requires pen and paper certifications. And we're thinking that each COE already has a system in place to route these sign-offs. Now that manual system can be replaced by the electronic certifications as long as the right people are assigned to the appropriate roles. Now the user management decision happens kind of on two levels. The first big important one is between the COE and the reporting entities, because the COE will be assigning all of the admins for the school districts, charter schools, and SELPAs. There's also a second level of decision-making that happens at the LEA itself once they have an administrator, because they can assign additional users, and they will all make decisions first based on who they want to report and certify data. Is it one person or two different people? And they can decide locally how to split the task between the different roles. So in this presentation here, we're mostly talking about the task of the COE assigning admins for the reporting entities. And we may have separate training or YouTube videos that'll focus on this second level of decision making. Now, how to select the administrators for all of these entities that need administrators, districts, SELPAs, and charters. So first of all, we want to reemphasize that each entity needs an assigned PADC administrator. This, of course, doesn't include counties that have agreements with their districts by virtue of which all of the data reporting happens at the county level. And those counties, mostly small counties, most likely only really need a COE administrator if they fulfill data collection functions for all of their entities. But we're thinking for the majority of the counties in the state, and for purposes of this presentation, we will assume that each COE will designate an administrator for districts, charter schools under their oversight, and SELPAs. Now, again, administrator is the only user role with permission to certify data, and we only require that electronic certification. We went through a process to determine that pen and paper certifications are not required for purposes of CDE in order for us to fund the LEAs. Now, remember that and for comparison, the desktop software is set up for both electronic and paper certifications. So we're thinking it's, first of all, it's possible and probably quite common with the desktop software to have one person key the data, electronically certify and export, and a different person, a superintendent or designee, to sign the paper certifications before or after export. So now that there is an option for electronic certification, this format for each county will, the format that each county decides to follow will determine the administrative assignment and selection process. So I want to remind everybody what the desktop software electronic certification looked like. There is a screenshot here from a district screen, like attendance school district. And there's a statement on the top that begins with, as a school district superintendent or designee, I hereby certify, and so forth. So I'm showing this to point out that we do have electronic certification, and it's not new, but this was duplicative of the paper certifications, so it may have been overlooked. Now, this is a sample of what we refer to as pen and paper certification in the desktop software. And again, like we mentioned, it's possible that in a small entity, the person completing the data entry, export, and this pen and paper certification was one and the same. But for larger entities, we suspect that data entry and export was completed by one individual and the signatures were done by another. And the former system required the signed certifications to be sent to the COE. We're no longer mandating it, but it can be a feature that a county can still implement on their own. So obviously, the options in the web applications are either to transition completely to electronic certifications and have the required signatories that were previously signing pen and paper forms to actually log into the system and electronically certify, or each entity may retain the pen and paper certifications. And perhaps there's a third alternative that exists, maybe where a county wants to employ different systems for different LEAs. And that again has to be left up to the local decision. Because as we mentioned, the only thing that is required for the purposes of CDE is the electronic certification in the PADC web application. Now, for those counties that want to transition to electronic certification right away, they should determine the reporting entity's administrator parameters. So, for example, should the reporting entity, meaning say a school district, should each school district's administrator be the superintendent or CBO or any other position or staff, as long as they're designated by the superintendent, or maybe there's another option that we haven't thought about. Once the county decides who they want to see as their district's administrators or initial district administrators, because a district can also set up additional administrators, we have provided a template that could be made into a local form, and it's posted on our website, and it's called PADC Web Application Access Administrator Assignment Template. So it has CAS user identification, certifications, and a spot for, say, a superintendent to designate this administrator. Now, the counties that are not ready for electronic certification may continue with pen and paper, and they may have an internal process for data review and certification that will happen prior to electronic certification. They still must have a PADC administrator. SFSD will route any questions to the administrator as identified in the PADC. To facilitate certification, these counties or districts can print data. And the things that can be printed are the specifics that I'll show you on the next slide. Each data entry screen can be printed, and the certification details page can be printed, which has the certification statement. So let me demonstrate what I'm referring to. So this is a screenshot of the first portion of the printout for attendance school district. It has the record information. It identifies the CDS code. It has the data ID, which is a new term for certification key, but it's like a tag that's attached to each record. And it has information on who saved data and ran validation. The next page that prints automatically has the data itself. For multi-record screens, each record has to be printed separately, and this is a copy of the certification details, which contains information, again, identifying the record, and it has a certification statement at the bottom. So we are working on compiling the most salient applicable laws and regulations on a web page, a separate web page, to help with certification. So you may see the purple text underlined in the certification statement that will ultimately link to this new web page with the salient statutory citations. So as far as the next steps that we may recommend, we would ask the COEs to review the existing internal business practices for how data is routed and certified, and determine what changes to this process are needed. So start with the existing business practices. We encourage everyone to review this administrator assignment template that we have and adapt it for local use. And we'll talk about that in a minute. If the county is ready, it should discuss implementation of the web application with the LEAs in the counties. And we will send an announcement to our very broad group that we have under our PACE listserv in early October, which we wanted to do that announcement subsequent to this webinar where we talked directly to the county offices of education. Please ensure that the county auditors or COE staff that will key that data are set up so they can begin assigning, before you begin assigning administrators to districts, charters, and SELPAs. And more details about the customizing templates. This particular template that is pertinent to this webinar is called PADC Web Application Access Administrator Assignment Template. Each county could add its own logo and contact information, and that's the reason we saved it just in a Microsoft Word document. You could add your own certifications that you may want, or if you have any kind of checklists that you're currently using for ADA reporting, you can incorporate that into that form if you wish. You could keep or remove the designation section. Let's so say the county decides to automatically assign each superintendent as a school district administrator, then they don't need the designation section. What we ask that you maintain from this template is the requirement for CAS user accounts. In other words, we do not want multiple staff at LEA to share one account. We want to have each individual have their own CAS account. And we are also asking that the acknowledgements and certifications that we have included in the template are retained as they are, because they apply directly to the PADC web application, and those acknowledgements and certifications are what enables us to use electronic certification for this web application. And we have come to the end of our presentation. So I would like to summarize some and emphasize some key things. We are transitioning to the web application, but at the same time, and requiring authorized access, but at the same time, we are largely maintaining certification requirements that we've had in the desktop software. They're just now being done in a different format. County auditor assignments, again, are a priority for timely reporting on taxes. Each reporting entity requires a PADC administrator, and we offer some options for additional assignments to fit local data reporting needs. And administrator assignments must be driven by decisions on who will certify data and how data approvals will flow. And that concludes our presentation. We have a new mailbox to forward any questions related to this new web application. It's padc@cde.ca.gov. And thank you very much again for those counties that have joined us and have already started assigning users. And we look forward to getting this application on the road in early October for tax reporting. Thank you.